Yeah, a couple of notes that come to mind to me is, you really want to empower your staff to be able to make the decisions that need to be made. That um, you give them a direction, and it's going to be the same direction every single time for every single case in that practice area. And one of the areas that I practice in is estate planning. So one thing that has to happen in pretty much every estate planning case is I've got to get a client to fill out a questionnaire. Well, I could be the one to call the clients and ask, hey, have you filled out that questionnaire yet? Or resend the email. Or instead, I can delegate that task to a paralegal, and that is that paralegal's responsibility now to get that questionnaire done. And the questionnaire may be completed, and it may be at a point where I can review it and say, this isn't filled out enough, we need more information. And we tell the paralegal, okay, you go back to the client and you ask for the names and addresses of the client's kids so that we can put that into our system. These are things that are actually very time consuming. Calling a client and having a conversation that may take 10 or 15 minutes. And kind of the frustrating part of law practice can be, I know that that's a 10 or 15-minute conversation, but I really only need about 30 seconds of information from the phone call. And so is it the best use of the attorney's time to make that phone call? Probably not. But then when we were talking about, should you have an irrevocable trust versus a revocable trust, that's an attorney-client conversation that has to happen and that cannot be changed. You have to be the attorney that you have to be the employee to have that conversation with the client, and you really can't shirk that duty. So I guess that's kind of where I see leadership versus managing the law firm. Somebody that's kind of just managing is just making sure that these tasks are taken care of and handles those tasks by himself and isn't delegating as much as he ought to. I think when you're leading, you're really empowering your team members to understand their responsibility and to be able to act on it. Another thing that comes to mind is, just document gathering. It's kind of parallel to the estate planning questionnaire that we have filled out. But in some of my cases, whether it's estate administrations or it's Medicaid planning, we've got to have documentation of, bank accounts and retirement accounts and things like that. We need to have a listing of real estate. And again, document gathering can be very cumbersome. And that's where you really want to train up your paralegals to understand what they need to get from the client so that you can review the file and have everything there for you. I think that is going to free up a whole lot of time for you if you're able to do that.
Yeah, and it will also help identify what information may also be needed that you get to follow up on. So if the team member who is responsible for that was unable to get a question answered, now you have one thing to do versus 10. And so it's much easier to have that conversation and say, oh, by the way, I still need so-and-so's date of birth, address, what have you. And I think that's one of those things that you start picking up inertia by having things already in process, and it's easier to keep it moving that way. And you're less likely to procrastinate on it because boy, I'm going to have to go through all of these things. But now we've kind of tagged these two things together, and I'm explaining the difference between the different types of trusts, and I'm asking one piece of information. And so my brain goes, hey, I'm good with that. And so I think those are the things that as you identify in your practice, what is it that only you can do as the lawyer? And what is it that only someone else can do better and more economically for the client and for the firm as a whole? then you start to enjoy what you do a lot more as well. And so kind of benefits everybody around, which is pretty impressive.